verses. Okay, that was really cool. Now we're gonna go back and look at what we read, right, and understand this and get into the nitty gritty of the word. And I'm gonna try to do this to where it's not gonna take all day. But like I said, once I make these videos or these, I don't know, audio videos, because I know that I'm gonna have some pictures showing above as I talk here, but it's basically, it's audio here, but that's cool. We're going to get into it. So in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The earth was formless and empty, and the darkness covered the deep waters, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the surface of the waters. Okay, so some commentaries say that between Genesis 1:1 and Genesis 1:2, that, Satan fell from heaven. Some say that it may have been before Genesis 1. Satan fell like lightning from heaven. There is even a good timeline that I'm going to show, and I'll show in a lot of my videos, that somebody has created. I know they have a copyright and a date there on the bottom of there, so the credit goes to them for that. That's all biblically based. You got to understand this. And so Satan jacked up, and we know his history there. They get more into it in later verses. I want to say it's Ezekiel that really gets into it, if I remember correctly. And I think another one of the verses somewhere else really gets into the details of Satan and how he was cast out and stuff like that. But he was basically, the executor of the presence of the Lord. This is where, if you ever heard that term executor or executor, or that term executive, that came from what Lucifer was when his name was Lucifer. His name isn't Lucifer anymore. It's the devil now. It's Satan, right? And you got to be careful of those people who call the devil by his old name, because when he was, an angel for the Lord, it was all good. It was fine, and at this time, there was free will, or maybe Satan was, there was free will in heaven at a certain time, and Satan chose to go against God. And now, after that time, we're going to be getting into other verses of Scripture in the future, so I'm not trying to jump and get ahead of myself, but whether there's free will in heaven right now, I really don't know the answer to that. God may have stopped free will, so the angels are the ones that are left, the 2/3 of the angel that didn't side with Satan are left, and they decided to stay with God, right? There's either the things that I've come up with out of reading the Bible is there's probably, and I'm not the only one that come up with this. I'm not saying that I came up with this junk. I'm just trying to connect the dots, right? Use the data the Bible gives us. They either don't have free will and work exclusively for the Lord, right? He's taken free will out of heaven, or there is still free will, and God has, I know he's got these windows, right? Because there's a verse that looks into it where, there's somebody in heaven and they're looking in a window that shows hell, so they can have a constant reminder of, hey, if you want to go against the Lord, that's where you're going to end up. You know what I'm saying? It's the only other place for people who don't want to listen to the Lord. So it's either that or there is no free will among the angels. Like I said, these are commentaries, and a lot of these are theories by connecting the dots in the scriptures. I'm not saying that this is a truth. It could be one of those. You never know. It could be something else entirely. But anyway, between Genesis 1 and Genesis 2, or Genesis 1:1 and 1:2, or even before that, they say that the devil could have been cast out of heaven. And Jesus said to his disciples, I was there when God cast the devil out of heaven. And it was like lightning. You know what I'm saying? It was quick. The devil didn't even know what hit him. And whew. And the devil brought that on himself by conspiring against God, calling God a tyrant. Okay? And you notice people like to do that today. They like to still do that today. and it's not right. You know what I'm saying? And so that's why, we can see that, he was there in the garden. We'll read about that later, and he tempts Adam and Eve and gets them all jacked up. You know what I'm saying? See, you got to understand, God is not afraid of the devil. The devil, you never know. God in his mercy was just letting the devil, do what he needs to do. You know what I'm saying? Go around and still, just, I don't know, do what he's doing, right? But God can also see the future. He knows what the devil is going to do. He knows the devil's end, right? Whether or not the devil knows his end, it really wouldn't matter. He's insane anyway. He thinks he's God, and he thinks he can do a better job than God. And basically only in his dreams. Only in his dreams and fantasies. And that's why a lot of fantasies and entertainment has the evil ruling, or people who are not chosen by God in certain positions of power. But we know that there are people like that in the world as well. And they've gotten that far because of them not knowing the truth. Because if they knew the truth, they probably wouldn't be in those positions of power with the evil influence over them. But anyway, we're just really dissecting that, okay? And so many people would say that he was the reason why it was dark and void. He was the reason why there was darkness and void everywhere. So amongst that darkness and void, God said, I'm going to make life and light come from this. I'm going to create something out of nothing. And so God did. So let's continue on. The earth was formless and empty, and darkness covered the deep waters, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the surface of the waters. Okay, so God's Spirit was present there. So water was able to exist even on the earth, which was formless and empty, and the darkness covered it. So let's take a look. Let's stop here for a second and look at the other planets. You got Mercury, you got Venus, you got Saturn, you got Jupiter, you got Mars, which is a little bit different from Earth, right? It's further away, and the gravity, you'll be a little bit lighter there. It's bigger than Earth by a bit. I'm not going to get into the actual numbers here. I don't know that, but we know it's a little bit bigger than Earth. Each planet has its own sound and unique way that it sounds. Upon approaching it, those awesome spacecrafts have gotten that. It's very awesome. Now, these planets have form. So according to the Word of God, those planets have form. Okay? Now, they are covered in darkness. Some only on the side that the sun is not touching, of course. And on those cold sides, man, it gets really cold. You probably wouldn't be able to live on those cold sides. And then on the hot sides, it gets too flippin' hot. You know what I'm saying? You can't survive. So Earth is positioned perfectly to where it's not super duper too hot for us, and it's not super duper too cold for us. We have vegetation. Notice there's not really vegetation on these other planets. It's either gas or a big thing of stone and rock, or it's nothing but water, or it's just gases, cold gases, hot gases, nitrates, and it may even be a planet with nothing but diamonds in it. But the chances of us finally getting to that planet and getting the diamonds and then coming back with the diamonds is just highly unlikely. And even if we were to, we would totally jack up the diamond market, and diamonds wouldn't be as expensive as they are now. So yeah, it's not even worth it to go to another world or another planet to freaking get diamonds. We do not have warp space. We have not come up with that yet. We don't have hyperdrives, whatever you want to call them, that are in the sci-fi movies. But basically, a lot of these other planets, they don't have life. They don't have vegetation. You notice the world has life. If the Spirit of God takes interest in it, it's going to have life. It's going to be on and popping. You know what I'm saying? So then God said, let there be light. And there was light. That's the light that covers the whole world. If you look at the Mars, you don't see light. Okay? If you look at Jupiter, you don't really see light. If you look at Saturn, I mean, we see the colors that the NASA spaceship has allowed us to see of these planets. And so we create models of these planets, and we can see those models. And the light is reflecting off of it from the sun, of course. And so light is on it, but it's from the sun. It doesn't produce its own light. You know what I mean? Like if you look at the world, that ozone layer around the world, it's like there's a light, a protective shell around the world. It's something. It's really cool when you look at how different the world is from the other planets. And that's because of God. And God saw that the light was good, and he separated the light from the darkness. God called the light day and the darkness night. Pretty self-explanatory, right? And evening passed and the morning came, marked the first day. Then God said, let there be a space between the waters to separate the waters from the heavens and from the waters from the earth. And that is what happened. He separated those waters, and he called that space sky. So get this. And this is where the creationists use what God said in the Bible to make sense of how the old world used to be before the flood. So we all know there's going to be a flood coming, all right? And the flood is going to come. It's going to flood the world. And a lot of people, not a lot of people, but if you connect the dots in the Bible, you can see that there was waters in the sky. So that means the world, not only did it have the ozone layer and oxygen, but it had a protective layer of ice around the planet. A protective layer of ice around the planet. And what that did is it created like this nice, cool greenhouse effect. You know how greenhouses are usually a certain temperature and it keeps the plants alive? Well, the ice kept the planet cool so it wasn't too hot from the sun's rays. A lot of people would even say that those harmful UV rays from the sun that we have now, we didn't have then, because the Lord had put the firmament in the sky was in the form of ice. And that's why it says later on, we'll read that Adam walked in the cool of the day with the Lord. You know, when I first saw that when I was young, I was like, the cool of the day? But the day is hot. How is the day cool? Back then in the old world, it was a totally different story. The old world was better than the pre-flood era was better than the post-flood era. Because all that water that was protecting the earth and the ozone layer around the planet, God made that stuff rain down on the world. And that's how come there was a world flood. And that's all that water. Some people, if you look at Kent Hovind, who is really cool in his study of science and relating it to the Bible, I know he's been involved in some other things about not paying his taxes or whatnot and whatever. And yes, you got to pay your taxes. You know, Jesus said that, render unto God's what's God's, and render unto Caesar's what's Caesar's. So along with paying your tithe, offering, and pledges and whatever not, which we'll get into later, as a good Christian citizen, you also got to pay your taxes as well. Taxes and utility bills is probably going to be with you till the day you die, no matter who you are. But, you know, if you're a Christian, you got to make sure you're on top of that, especially. Everybody has to, but, you know, if you're trying to be on right standing with God, you got to follow the laws of the land too. So, but one of the things he said was that all that water had to go somewhere when it drained out after it rained and flooded the earth and totally rearranged the surface of the earth in certain ways. And so, he says where it went to in his videos, but I remember one of the things that he mentioned was the Grand Canyon. You know, it said from him that all that water could have drained down in the Grand Canyon. And if you go to the Grand Canyon, you can actually see flood lines there. There's a whole book about that. People have gotten into that. I didn't get into the details, but it's really awesome how that connects. And then he was talking about they were saying in the North Pole or the South Pole, I think it's Antarctica, somewhere there's like a big